and I saw little children holding signs saying, "Thank you for giving me back my future."
Tamara finally had a chance to speak at the inquiry because she hasn't been able to publicly talk because of the insane bail conditions that have been imposed on her for her alleged, what is it even called? Mischief.
They stayed back here where the truckers are hanging out for about 20 minutes. They grabbed their coffees, and it seems as now they have just blocked the border here in Coutts, Alberta to Sweetgrass, Montana.
Whether they're in Ottawa, Windsor, Coutts, or Emerson, they're endangering jobs, they're threats to our economy and to public safety. The blockades are hurting small businesses and neighborhoods. At the border, they're impacting trade, supply chains, and manufacturing. The people these blockades are hurting are everyday families. Auto assembly workers, farmers, truckers, and blue-collar Canadians.
Wife today, and I told her, "Hey, honey, like, how are things back on the farm?" And she goes, "They're good. I learned to run the snowblower. It was snowing a little bit there last week." And she says, I don't leave till our freedoms come back.
We're a small French minority. This is what it looks like, Mr. Justin Trudeau. We're Canadian patriots. We stand together for our rights and our freedoms, and you cannot divide us anymore.
Over the last 2 years, Canadians have watched as the civil liberties of all have been systematically eroded. We watched as our seniors were isolated and our kids were masked. We watched as our working class was abused and forced into experimental vaccinations for the sake of public safety. While using emergency powers, our provincial and federal governments, with the assistance of health departments, have systematically taken away our rights and freedoms. We, the people, call on Jason Kenney and Justin Trudeau to immediately stop and retract all provincial and federal mandates and emergency health measures. To all our doctors, nurses, paramedics, truckers, government employees, and all others who have lost their jobs or whose freedoms to choose have been taken away, we hear you. To our seniors, our veterans, and all those who have given everything for this great country, we stand with you in this fight against government overreach.
Call for calm amongst anybody who feels sympathetic to those engaged in this blockade. Please stay away from the area.
I'm heading out on this traveler's road, and I won't find peace till the day we rest in harmony. Tell me what's so wrong if I choose to disagree. Taking how we want till we're living free. Fighting till we're living free. Oh, standing in unity.
Premier Kenney did make an announcement on February 8th that the provincial government was announcing a plan for a gradual easing of the pandemic-related public health measures. Is that right?
Correct. And based on our response to his message, it was not the message we were looking for.
And what was his message and what was the message you were looking for?
The message that Kenney gave was, it was a phased approach with a lot of maybes. And there was no surety of anything in that message. It spoke to a lot of different aspects, and there was a lot of different methods to back out of that phased approach, but it really, it was something because they had to address, you know, there was pressure. Even though we weren't communicating, there was pressure. Coutts did apply pressure to the provincial government. And this was not just exclusively Coutts. This was you know, you all, the evidence is submitted to the slow rolls in Edmonton, to the protests of 5,000 to 10,000 in Calgary, the inconveniences on highways all over the province. Obviously, the focus is on Coutts, Ottawa, Emerson, Ambassador, Sarnia, etc. But Albertans were frustrated, and they were making it very aware to their government that they wanted to see change.
The borders started getting, the international borders started getting blocked after the Freedom Convoy had already arrived in Ottawa. And I was in the various operations centers and logistics rooms, and there was no coordination, none. We would find out through social media or the legacy media about new blockades popping up, whether it was Coutts or Emerson or whatever. At one point, one of the key liaison officers for the Ottawa City Police had phoned me because I arrived at night in downtown Ottawa for the protests and I'm not familiar with Ottawa. The police liaison said, "Keith, I also need to talk to you about Windsor." And I said to him, "Is that a north-south or an east-west?" Because I thought it was a street. He's like, no, and there's no street here called Windsor. He's the border. And I was like, I don't know anything about the border. What is going on at the border?
You can tell me, though, that, and you know, to the credit of you and your team, that you managed to get this blockade at the Ambassador Bridge cleared within 2 days of your appointment as CIC.
Yes.
And you would agree with me then that you and your team managed to resolve one of the most urgent priorities in the country without the benefit of the Emergencies Act.
Correct.
The blockade was cleared and the bridge reopened before the Emergencies Act was invoked. Is that right?
On the 14th, so the 13th around midnight into the 14th, I think the bridge opened around midnight on the 14th. So the Emergencies Act was invoked sometime on the 14th. So yes, the answer to your question is yes.
Invoking the Emergencies Act when borders were open is very hard to swallow. They should have reassessed on February 14th. Okay, things have shifted. Things have now changed since we talked about this last, and at this point, there's no need to invoke the Emergencies Act.
It was clear that the borders all reopened before the invocation occurred of the Emergencies Act. And that left Ottawa as the only event. So, you know, a critical question is, well, why did they do it? And the best answer they had, which was not a good answer, they being the Prime Minister and the cabinet ministers and the senior federal officials, was they thought that more border protests could occur in the future. Well, a border protest could occur today.
Did you observe any violence or harassment during the protest?
Never did, no.
The Lion of Calgary, and every desire is now satisfied. Hearing your love. Come on now.
Is there any violence?
No.
Was it a peaceful protest?
Absolutely.
Were there families there?
Yes.
Did you observe any kids playing road hockey?
Sure did.
So one could state that it was a very Canadian protest.
It was, yeah.
Is there a definition of the word emergency in that agreement?
I actually have a copy of it with me, but I don't have it readily available, and I can't recall.
I take it that your understanding is that the definition of the word emergency, as contemplated under the Provincial Police Service Agreement, is different from the word emergency under either the Federal Emergencies Act or Provincial Emergency Management Act.
Okay. They block the border. Really? Do you know how many, and I'm sorry, I'm not mad, but I've dealt with this in the judicial review. Do you know how many land border crossings by truck or car there are in Canada to the United States?
Probably
50? Over 100.
The city declared an emergency, the province declared an emergency, and then the federal government declared an emergency. And I think that ought to have sent a signal to a lot of people that this is a serious matter and will not be allowed to happen again.
You have issues at 4 border crossings. Now, did you see the report that came out about Windsor, the blocking at Windsor? How it actually said, oh, it didn't create any economic impact because they just went another way? Not a national emergency.
Now to a frustrated Ottawa woman stuck in quarantine for 14 days after she says she had issues accessing the must-have ArriveCan app.
Mr. Speaker, as an MP with 4 border crossings in my riding, I can tell you the ArriveCan app has been a real mess. Take the example of Bernadette in my riding. She was forced into a 14-day quarantine when she is double vaccinated, has a booster, and is now receiving threatening phone calls harassing her to complete her testing requirements or face a jail time and or a $650,000 fine. She's 75 years old. When will this Liberal government fix the mess they created at the borders and rescind this unnecessary quarantine order against my constituents?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Speaker, I want to assure all members that we are going to never hesitate on this side of the House to introduce the public health care measures that are necessary to protect the health and safety of all Canadians, especially now that we are dealing with a new variant of concern in the Omicron.
ArriveCan was an app that the federal government imposed on anybody coming into Canada. So whether you were a visitor from Europe or the United States or a trucker doing cross-border trucking from the United States, you had to download an app, fill it out, and include your vaccine status on it. I think you had to upload your vaccine status. That is kind of fine and dandy if you expect it. Do you think that people coming from Europe or Asia know what the rules and regulations are to come into Canada and what the government has imagined is important with this ArriveCan application? No.
Look at, this is what happens when you enter your own country. This is what happens. Double vaccinated, got 3 COVID tests done, and here I am, being questioned. Here we go. It cost me $600 in COVID tests. I just showed it to you.
Why don't we talk about what the government did? Imposing vaccine mandates. ArriveCan app that was incredibly controversial and caused a lot of border impact. Where's the assessment on that? I can guarantee you, and there was evidence on it, but they didn't quantify it, but the impact from the ArriveCan app is going to be magnitudes higher than anything the border blockades could have even attempted to do.
There was reports in the earlier days of the protests in Ottawa that there were sympathetic Americans or Canadians living in the United States who were going to come up and cross borders. And the government officials who testified were quite proud of themselves for blocking that from happening. My understanding is virtually none of them got through, although they were able to block them by using the COVID restrictions. So not another reason for the Emergencies Act.
You said during your testimony that you didn't know if you needed a court order to seize the bank accounts as freeze assets. Is there a reason why you weren't aware that you needed a court order to do that?
No, the seizing, I knew that you needed a court order. I wasn't sure on the freezing because we've never done the freezing of accounts. Obviously, when we seize accounts, that's a different aspect, but the freezing was pretty new to me and I haven't looked at it any further.
I'm heading out on this traveler's road, leaving all behind to revive my soul. day we rest in harmony. They tell me I'm the one to blame, so they cast their stones and put me to shame. Damn your lies, you are a master in disguise. Tell me what's so wrong if I choose to disagree. We're taking how we want till we're living free. Call me what you